edition of Laura's Kitchen. Today we're going to be making mutton rolls. Now mutton is another word for goat, and mutton rolls is essentially, or goat rolls is essentially rolls that's filled with mutton or goat and potatoes, and it's spicy and it's really good. Today I've got my assistant chef Aaron, who's here to help me out, and he'll be helping me put all the ingredients together as we go through it. I'll take a moment to explain all the ingredients that we need and all the tools that we need to be able to make mutton rolls. So let's get started. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to be telling you about all the ingredients that goes into making the goat or mutton curry that's supposed to go into the wrap. And I'll walk you through all of the ingredients that we're going to be using today. So we have about a teaspoon of fennel seeds. We have 1.5 teaspoons of mustard seeds and about 4 dried chili peppers. And this is going to go in beforehand. What we also have as well is we have about a handful of curry leaves. We have about 4 cloves of garlic. We have an onion and a half that's chopped up nice and thinly. I've got about 4 or 5 chillies that I chopped up in half. I have something called Ramba leaves, which gives it the spiciness, and I have some ginger as well. Here, what we have is something called Vasi thool, which is very similar to the fennel seeds that we've used, except it's blended up and it's nicely finely grounded, and we have that all set up to go. I've got about 2 pounds of mutton. I've seasoned it already because it has to sit overnight or a few hours if you have time, and it gives it a bit more flavor. What I've put in it is a bit of salt, a little bit of curry powder, a little bit of turmeric powder, potatoes, and I've mixed all of that together and have that ready. I've got a bowl full of potatoes here, and this is going to be boiled, and it's going to be blended up to make it a paste that's going to go into the rolls as well. I've got about 3 teaspoons of chili powder, and you need to be able to season as you go along. So if you want a bit more spicy, put a bit more. And I have some turmeric powder as well on the side. And the other ingredients are going to be what's going to be used to make the rolls. So I'll walk you through those as I make the rolls. But for the time being, this is what's going to be used to make the mutton curry. All right, so now we're going to be making the curry. I've got a nice pot here that I'm going to be using. I've got my assistant giving the spatula that he's going to be using. I'm going to be putting in about a tablespoon of oil beforehand. And I'm going to let that get that heat up a bit. I'm going to put it between medium, just above medium, so that the oil heats up. And when that's ready, I'll start putting the rest of the ingredients. Start putting in the ingredients. So once the oil is hot enough, I'm going to be putting in the mustard seed first. Right, so I'm going to drop that in. I'm going to be putting in the fennel seeds next, dropping those in as well. And then the dried chili peppers, I'm going to be throwing this in. I'm going to reduce the temperature down to just under medium, and I'm going to have my assistant that's going to stir this around a bit. And when you see the mustard seed starts popping, then that's when you know that it's ready for the next set. Now the mustard seed, you can see that it's starting to pop, so you know that it's ready for the next set of ingredients. The next set of ingredients, I have everything here. I'm going to be putting in the green chili. I'm going to be putting in the onions as well, the garlic chopped in half. I'm going to be putting in the ginger, the cloves, and I'm just going to put all of that in, and I'm just going to stir it gently. And the temperature, you should bring it down to between medium and low, and gently stir it until it changes color. Step is, once the onion starts to brown a bit, you want to be able to take the curry leaves and you want to be able to rip it in half, and you want to be able to throw that in. And the Ramba leaves as well, I'm going to be taking those, I'm going to be tearing those, and I'm going to be putting that in as well. And I'm going to be stirring that lightly as I go. Temperature again, medium to low, so it doesn't overcook. So once you see that the onion starts to brown, you have it half cooked. What I tend to do is I take half of it out and I put it in a bowl, and I'm going to be adding it to the curry at a later point. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be adding about 3 tablespoons of curry powder into it with the yellow powder, and I'm just going to let this cook. I'm going to stir it and I'm going to let it cook for a bit. So I'm going to be stirring this in with the curry powder and the mix that I had from earlier. Mix it in for a bit. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be adding the goat curry in. And the goat curry has been lightly seasoned. It's been sitting around for about a few hours. I've got some potatoes in. Because I'm making the mutton rolls or goat rolls, you want to be able to put more potatoes in. And I'm going to be dropping the goat meat and the potatoes into the mix. And as I put it in, I'm going to be stirring it as well, so that everything, the seasoning comes all over. Now I'm going to be just turning it, making sure that all the pieces of meat have been exposed to the curry powder that I have in here. I'm going to be tossing it a bit, and then I'm going to let it cook at about medium temperature for about 15 minutes. So I have, when I seasoned the mutton, I had salt, a bit of turmeric powder and chili powder in the mutton as well. But what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to put a little bit more salt at this point as well. You can actually omit this step and put it at the end when you want to taste it, because everyone has a different preference in terms of how much salt they want to be able to use. And then again, I'm going to stir it again once around. And when you're making goat curry, you want to make it more liquid. If you want to have it more liquid, you can put a little bit of hot water in it so that it becomes more of a curry. But because we're making it for goat mutton rolls, you want it to be dry and pasty. So I'm not going to be putting any water in it. I'm just going to make sure it's dry so that it fits well in the mutton rolls.
The goat curry.
That was my assistant covering up the goat curry, making sure that the temperature rises and it's able to cook the meat well. Alright, so while the mutton is cooking, I've got my assistant here who's occasionally stirring the goat curry to make sure that it doesn't stick and it cooks well. While that's going, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be making the potatoes. I'm going to be boiling a bit of potatoes in some hot water, so that when you're making the paste, it becomes a bit it becomes nice and potato with meat, and it's nice and fluffy. Making the shell for the mutton rolls, and the way you make the shells, as I mentioned, you take about 3 cups of all-purpose flour. You put that in. I'm going to be taking about 1 tablespoon of cornstarch, and I put that in as well. And I've got a little bit of turmeric powder. I've got 1 teaspoon of turmeric powder. I'm just going to be throwing that in. I'm going to be throwing in a bit of salt. 1 teaspoon should be good. And I've got about 3 cups of warm water. And what I'm going to be doing here is as I mix this up, I'm just going to be gently putting the water in. And you want to make sure that the consistency is very watery, because when you make the shell, you want it to make sure that it's nice and thin. In making sure that it's tossed occasionally. And now what I'm going to be doing is I've got a little bit of Vasi thool, which was fennel seeds that's been blended up with a little bit of curry leaves, and I'm going to be putting about 3/4 of it in at this point. I'm going to be adding the coconut milk that we had from earlier. I'm going to be putting in about 3 teaspoons of it, maybe about 4 teaspoons. All the while, I'm just going to be adding a little bit more of the chili powder, or curry powder rather, and I'm just going to give this a nice toss.
making sure that you get all of it nicely tossed. And then I'm going to hand it over to my assistant who's going to be tossing it. I'm going to bring the temperature down just under medium to low, and I'm going to be cooking it for another 10 minutes as well. Once I have the flour mixed up, I'm going to be putting it into a blender so that the consistency is nice and uniform. Put all of that in. And I'm going to be blending this for about 30 seconds. Blended, you can see that the consistency is uniform, and this is exactly what we want. So we put that aside, and that's ready to go. So it's been about 5 minutes since I put the coconut milk and the rest of the spices in, and I'm just going to keep occasionally turning it, and you can see that the consistency is good. And you want to be able to cook this for another 10 minutes or so on low temperature. So the mutton has been cooking for about 10 minutes since I put in the coconut milk, and it's set at a temperature of low. What I'm going to be doing now is that the rest of the spices that I pulled aside at the beginning, I'm going to be adding those in right now. As well, I'm going to be adding a little bit of the curry leaves. I'm just going to be ripping that up and throwing those in. And the Ramba leaves as well, I'm going to be throwing that in, and I'm just going to be tossing it lightly. And I'll cook this on low temperature for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to be putting in the last ingredient.
Now you want to break the egg into a bowl?
That it has a lot of mutton in it and very little potatoes. On the side, what I've done is I've boiled a bit of potatoes, I've mushed it up. So depending on the level of consistency that you want in the rolls, whether you want it more meaty or more potato-ish, you can add that consistency. Have this aside, and when you're making the rolls, you can decide what level of meatiness you want in the rolls. Now we're going to be baking the shell for the mutton rolls, and what you do is put a little bit of oil on the pan, on a flat pan. Make sure it heats up a bit. And what you do is take a spoonful of batter, drop it right in the middle, and gently swirl to make the shell. A bit of the mutton curry with a bit of potatoes, and I'm making it into a roll shape, and this is what's going to be the main. Now I'm going to be rolling it for the filling for the rolls, and so I'm going to be rolling it into a nice skinny roll here, and this is what's going to be the ingredient that goes into the whole mutton roll. So now we're going to actually make the roll. So once the batter is ready, I'm going to be taking the filling that I have set up here. I'm going to be putting it right in the middle. I'm going to be covering it up both sides, pressing it gently, taking a bit of oil, and I'm just going to be putting it on the side there. I'm just going to wrap this all around, and I'm just going to turn this, make sure it's nice and tight. And then what I'll do as well is I'm just going to be taking a bit of the batter, I'm going to be placing it on the inner side, and then I'm just going to be throwing it on the pan as well so that it cooks and it sticks together, because you don't want the filling coming out when you're cooking it. Once you've rolled the rolls up, you want to be able to dip it in egg, and you want to be able to drop it in breadcrumbs so that it you're ready to fry it. So you're coating it with these two, and make sure that all parts of the roll is covered, because the last thing you want to be able to do is have it pop open. And you have two options of cooking it. You can cook it in the air fryer, or you can deep fry it. I'm going with the healthy option of an air fryer, and it comes out quite well, so we're comfortable with it, and that's what we're going to be doing. The rolls in the air fry, and you can see that it's got a nice crispiness to it, and it's healthy as well because you don't have the oil, and when you break it up you see the inside. It's very nice. All right, enjoy your mutton rolls.